tribal girl showed up in tears. The cowboy said, "You don't have to pretend with me." The town of Red Hollow was the kind of place where nothing new ever seemed to happen. It sat quietly between wide-open fields and low brown hills that stretched as far as the eye could see. A single road ran through the middle of town, lined with a few small shops, a gas station, a diner, and an old wooden general store that had been there for over 50 years. The wind often carried dust across the road, and in the evenings the sky turned orange and gold before fading into deep blue. People in Red Hollow liked routine. They woke up early, worked hard, and went home before dark. Everyone knew each other's names, and if someone new appeared, it didn't take long for the whole town to notice. That afternoon, just as the sun began to lower behind the hills, something unusual happened. A girl walked into town. She came from the far end of the road, the direction that led to open land and distant tribal territory. No bus dropped her off. No car stopped to let her out. She simply appeared, walking slowly with careful steps, carrying a small cloth bag over her shoulder. Her name was Ayanna. Her long dark hair was tied loosely behind her back, and her clothes were traditional, simple, and slightly dusty from travel. She looked tired, but there was something else in her eyes, too, something deeper than simple exhaustion. It was the look of someone carrying more than just a bag. A few people standing outside the diner noticed her first. "Who's that?" one man asked quietly. I don't know," another replied. She's not from around here." Ayanna felt the stares, even though no one spoke loudly. She kept her eyes forward, trying not to look nervous. But inside, her heart was beating fast. She had imagined this moment many times while lying awake at night in her village. She had imagined stepping into a new place, starting fresh, being brave. Now that she was actually here, it felt different, bigger. She had left her tribal community early that morning before the sun had fully risen. The mountains behind her village had looked beautiful in the soft morning light. For a moment she had almost turned back. That land held her childhood memories, running through tall grass, listening to her grandmother's stories by the fire, learning songs passed down through generations. But it also held arguments, whispers, pressure. For years, Ayanna had felt a quiet restlessness inside her. She loved her people deeply. She respected the traditions, the ceremonies, the way elders were honored and nature was treated with care. But she also loved books. She loved learning about the world beyond the mountains. She wanted to study, to understand laws, to protect land through knowledge and education. Some people in her community admired her curiosity. Others did not. "She asks too many questions," one elder had once said. "She thinks the outside world has better answers," another had added. Her family stood somewhere in the middle. Her mother worried constantly. Her father stayed quiet but distant. Her uncle believed she should stay, marry young, and build a life close to home. "You belong here," he had told her firmly. "This is your path." But Ayanna had begun to wonder something important. What if her path was wider than they believed? The final argument happened 3 nights before she left. It wasn't loud. No one shouted. That almost made it worse. It was a calm conversation filled with heavy silence and disappointed looks. She tried to explain that education did not mean disrespect, that learning more about the outside world could help their people in the future. But her words felt like stones dropping into deep water. No one truly heard them. That night, she made her decision. Now, standing in Red Hollow, she questioned everything. Was she selfish? Was she brave? Was she foolish? She walked past the gas station, her boots scraping lightly against the dirt. She hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. She had tried to save the little money she carried. Hunger made her feel slightly dizzy, but she refused to let it show. The bell above the general store door jingled as someone walked out. A tall man stepped onto the wooden porch. He wore a faded denim shirt, worn boots, and a brown hat that shaded his face from the setting sun. His name was Daniel Harper. Daniel had lived in Red Hollow most of his life. He owned a ranch just outside town, where he raised horses and cattle. He wasn't the type to gossip or involve himself in town drama. After losing his wife 5 years earlier, he had grown even quieter. Work filled his days. Silence filled his nights. He noticed Ayanna the moment she passed the store, not because of her clothes, not because she was new, but because of the way she walked. There was a carefulness in her steps, like someone unsure if the ground would hold. There was strength there too, but it looked fragile, like thin glass. Ayanna reached the edge of town and stopped near a wooden bench beside the road. She looked around, pretending to study the buildings. In truth, she had no idea where to go next. She had imagined finding work quickly. She had imagined confidence guiding her forward. Instead, she felt small under the wide sky. The wind picked up slightly, brushing her hair across her face. She blinked hard, trying to stop the tears forming in her eyes. She'd promised herself she would not cry. Not here, not where strangers could see, but the weight of everything, leaving home, disappointing family, stepping into the unknown, pressed down on her chest. A single tear slipped down before she could stop it. She quickly turned her face away and wiped it with the back of her hand. Daniel saw it. He didn't know her story. He didn't know where she came from exactly. But he recognized that look. He had seen it in the mirror years ago after standing beside a hospital bed, feeling helpless and alone. Pain has a certain quiet expression it doesn't shout. It lingers. Daniel leaned against the porch railing for a moment, watching carefully. He didn't want to frighten her. He knew how small towns could feel to someone new. Two women across the street whispered to each other. Ayanna noticed and lowered her gaze. She suddenly felt foolish for coming. Maybe her uncle had been right. Maybe she didn't belong anywhere else. Her breathing became uneven. She pressed her bag closer to her chest as if it could protect her. The sky above her shifted into deeper shades of orange and pink. Shadows stretched longer across the road. Evening was approaching, and she still had no place to stay. Daniel made a quiet decision. He stepped down from the porch and crossed the street slowly, giving her enough space so she wouldn't feel cornered. His boots made steady sounds against the dirt, not rushed, not aggressive. Ayanna sensed someone approaching and straightened quickly, wiping her face again. She forced her expression to look calm, to look strong, to look like she didn't need help. But her eyes betrayed her. Daniel stopped a few feet away, keeping his voice gentle. "Evening," he said simply. She nodded. Evening. Dust clung lightly to the hem of her dress. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the strap of her bag. "You passing through?" he asked carefully. "Or planning to stay a while?" The question wasn't demanding. It was open, giving her space to answer or not. Ayanna hesitated. I'm not sure yet," she admitted softly. Her voice carried both fear and determination. Daniel studied her for a brief second, then looked toward the fading sky. "It gets cold out here after dark," he said. "Town's small, not many places open late." She nodded again, swallowing hard. She didn't want to explain everything to a stranger. She didn't even know if she could put it into words yet. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a doorway waiting to be opened. Ayanna looked down at her boots, fighting another wave of emotion. She had come so far, she couldn't fall apart now. Daniel noticed her clenched jaw, the way she was holding herself together with pure will. Something inside him shifted. He remembered what it felt like to stand alone, pretending to be fine when everything inside was breaking, and though neither of them knew it yet, this quiet moment on a dusty road at sunset would change both of their lives. The town of Red Hollow had seen many ordinary evenings, but this one was different. Because a tribal girl had walked into town carrying tears she tried to hide. Daniel did not rush his words. He had learned long ago that people who are hurting do not respond well to pressure. Instead, he kept his voice calm and steady. "If you need a place to sit for a while," he said gently, "there's a bench right there, and the diner's still open for another hour." Ayanna nodded, but she didn't move. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her small cloth bag. She wanted to appear strong, like she had everything under control. But the truth was simple. She was tired, hungry, and unsure of what to do next. The wind brushed across the open road again, cooler now as the sun dipped lower. The sky was fading into soft shades of purple and orange. The town was settling down for the evening. Lights inside the diner flickered on. A pickup truck drove past slowly, its driver glancing curiously at the unfamiliar girl standing near the bench. Daniel noticed the way she avoided eye contact with anyone passing by. "You new around here?" he asked, not as an interrogation, but as conversation. "Yes," she replied quietly. "I just arrived." "Long trip?" She hesitated for a second before answering. "Yes." He could tell there was more to that answer, but he did not push further. Instead, he looked toward the diner. "You eaten yet?" The question caught her off guard. Her stomach answered before she could, giving a small, embarrassing growl. Her face flushed slightly. Daniel pretended not to notice, giving her dignity in that small moment. "There's good soup tonight," he said casually. "Nothing fancy, but warm." Ayanna swallowed. Pride rose inside her chest. She didn't want to look helpless. Back home, she had always tried to prove she could handle things on her own. Accepting help felt like admitting weakness. "I'll be fine," she said softly. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Didn't say you wouldn't be." That answer surprised her. He wasn't treating her like someone broken. He wasn't looking at her with pity. His voice carried respect, not sympathy. Silence settled between them again, but this time it felt lighter. After a few moments, Daniel spoke once more. I was heading back to my ranch anyway. If you'd prefer somewhere quieter than the diner, I can make dinner there. You're welcome to join. No pressure. The offer was simple, no hidden meaning, no strange tone. Ayanna's heart beat faster. Every lesson she had ever learned about safety told her to be careful. She studied his face closely. There was no rush in his eyes, no impatience. He stood a comfortable distance away, hands resting loosely at his sides. She sensed something important. He wasn't trying to take control of the situation. He was giving her a choice. That made all the difference. I don't want to cause trouble, she said. You're not, he replied calmly. It's just dinner. She looked down at the ground, thinking quickly. The truth was, she had nowhere to go. The idea of sitting alone on that bench until dark frightened her more than she wanted to admit. After a long pause, she nodded slightly. Okay. Daniel didn't smile widely or act dramatic. He simply gave a small nod in return, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. My truck's over there, he said, gesturing toward a dusty blue pickup parked near the store. You can sit by the window if you'd like. As they walked toward it, Ayanna felt both nervous and strangely relieved. She climbed into the passenger seat carefully, placing her small bag on her lap. The seat smelled faintly of leather and hay. Daniel started the engine, and the truck rumbled to life. They drove out of town, the buildings growing smaller behind them. The road turned into open land, wide and quiet. Fences lined the fields, and in the distance she could see horses grazing under the fading light. The sight made something inside her relax. She had grown up around nature. The open sky reminded her of home, but without the heavy expectations. You from the tribal lands east of here? Daniel asked after a few minutes. Yes, she replied. Beautiful country out there. Many outsiders spoke about her community with misunderstanding or judgment. His voice held respect. It is, she said softly. They drove in comfortable silence after that. The sky slowly darkened, and the first stars began to appear. When they reached the ranch, Ayanna felt a mix of awe and uncertainty. The house was modest but strong, built from wood with a wide porch wrapping around the front. A barn stood nearby, and beyond it stretched open fields under the night sky. Daniel parked the truck and stepped out, giving her space to follow when she felt ready. This way, he said gently. Inside, the house felt warm and lived in. It wasn't perfect or fancy, but it felt steady. Ayanna noticed framed photographs on a small shelf. A woman smiling beside Daniel, both younger, both happy. She looked away politely. You can set your bag there, he said, pointing to a chair near the table. Kitchen's this way. The smell of fresh bread filled the air as Daniel began preparing a simple meal. He moved with quiet confidence, clearly used to cooking for himself. He heated soup on the stove and sliced bread without rushing. Ayanna stood near the counter at first, unsure what to do. You can sit, he said. Or if you'd rather help, there's clean plates in that cabinet. Grateful for something to focus on, she opened the cabinet and carefully took out 2 plates. The simple act helped calm her racing thoughts. They sat across from each other at the wooden kitchen table. Steam rose from the bowls of soup. The warmth reached her face, and she realized how cold she had actually been. Thank you, she said quietly, before taking her first bite. The food tasted better than she expected, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was warm and steady. With each spoonful, the tight knot in her chest loosened slightly. Daniel didn't ask questions while she ate. He let her finish in peace. Halfway through the meal, she felt something shift inside her. The silence was safe. Too safe. Her eyes suddenly filled with tears again. She tried to blink them away quickly, but one slipped down her cheek. Embarrassed, she turned her face aside. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? Daniel asked gently. I didn't mean to. Her voice cracked. He leaned back slightly, giving her space. His expression remained calm. You don't have to pretend with me, he said quietly. The words hung in the air. They were simple, but they reached her deeper than anything else had that day. She had been pretending since morning, pretending she wasn't scared, pretending she wasn't hurt, pretending she wasn't unsure. Hearing someone say she didn't have to pretend felt like someone unlocking a door she had kept closed for years. The tears came more freely now, but they were not dramatic. They were silent and honest. Daniel did not move closer. He did not try to fix anything. He simply stayed there. After a few minutes, she wiped her face and took a shaky breath. I left home, she admitted softly. I figured, he said. I didn't leave because I hate it, she added quickly. I love my people. I just I couldn't stay the same. He nodded slowly, showing he understood more than she expected. Change can feel lonely, he said. She looked at him carefully. You sound like you know. A faint, almost invisible smile touched his face. I do. It felt shared. Outside, the wind moved gently through the fields. A horse neighed softly near the barn. The world felt calm. For the first time since leaving her village, Ayanna felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because her problems were solved, not because her future was clear, but because someone had offered her a place to rest without asking her to explain everything first. She finished her soup slowly, her hands no longer trembling. Daniel stood and began washing the dishes. You can stay in the spare room tonight, he said simply. It's nothing special, but it's clean. She hesitated. I don't want to be a burden. She nodded, feeling gratitude rise in her chest again. As the night deepened and stars filled the sky outside, Ayanna realized something important. Sometimes, safety does not arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the form of warm soup, a steady voice, and the simple words. The next morning, Ayanna woke up to the soft sound of wind moving past the window. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The room around her was simple. Wooden walls, a small dresser, a narrow bed with a clean quilt folded neatly at the end. Light from the rising sun slipped through the thin curtains, painting the room in soft gold. Then she remembered. She was no longer in her village. She was in a ranch house outside a small town called Red Hollow. She sat up slowly, listening. Somewhere outside she heard the distant sound of hooves against dirt and the creak of a barn door opening. The smell of fresh coffee drifted faintly through the hallway. Daniel was already awake. Ayanna swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood quietly. She folded the quilt carefully, just as her mother had taught her to respect any place she stayed. Before stepping out of the room, she paused, taking a steady breath. Yesterday had felt overwhelming, today felt uncertain, but it also felt like a beginning. When she stepped into the kitchen, Daniel stood near the stove flipping something in a pan. Morning light filled the space, making it feel warmer than it had the night before. Morning, he said without turning around, as if he had sensed her presence. Good morning, she replied softly. There's eggs and bread. Help yourself. She hesitated for only a second before moving closer. This time she did not feel as frozen as she had the night before. She reached for a plate and sat down at the table. For a while they ate in comfortable silence. Outside the window she could see wide fields stretching endlessly. A few horses moved slowly across the pasture, their shapes dark against the bright sky. It's peaceful here, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. Most days. After breakfast he stood and grabbed his hat from the counter. I've got work in the barn, he said. You're welcome to stay inside. Or come along. Up to you. The way he said it, up to you, made her chest feel lighter. I'll come, she answered. The air outside was crisp and fresh. The smell of hay and earth surrounded them as they walked toward the barn. Ayanna breathed deeply. The open space reminded her of home, but without the heavy expectations tied to every step she took. Inside the barn, sunlight streamed through small gaps in the wooden walls. Dust floated gently in the beams of light. The horses lifted their heads curiously as they entered. Daniel moved with steady purpose, checking water buckets and adjusting feed. You ever worked around horses? He asked. Yes, she said. Not exactly like this, but we had some near our village. You can start with him, he said, pointing toward a calm brown horse in the corner. Ayanna approached carefully, her movements slow and respectful. She ran her hand along the horse's neck before beginning to brush. The simple rhythm of the task settled her nerves. For a while they worked side by side without speaking much, but silence no longer felt heavy. It felt natural. After some time, Daniel broke it gently. You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to, he said, focusing on adjusting a saddle. But sometimes talking helps. She continued brushing the horse, her thoughts turning inward. I always thought I knew who I was, she began slowly, where I belonged, what my future would look like. But the older I got, the more questions I had, she continued. I love my community. I love our traditions. But I wanted to learn more. I wanted to study law and environmental science. I wanted to understand how land rights work, how governments make decisions. She paused, unsure how he would react. Instead of confusion, she saw interest in his eyes. That's important work, he said. In my village, she explained, some people believe that leaving to study means you think you're better than everyone else, or that you don't value tradition. That's not true. I wanted to protect what we have in a different way. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke. When I talked about going to college, Some elders said I was chasing outside ideas, that I would forget who I am. And would you? Daniel asked gently. She shook her head firmly. No, never. But why leave? He asked quietly. Ayana stopped brushing for a moment. The horse shifted slightly beside her. Because staying started to feel like pretending, she admitted. Pretending that I didn't want more. Pretending that my dreams were smaller than they really are. Daniel leaned against a wooden post, arms crossed loosely. Pretending can wear a person down, he said. She looked at him carefully. You said something like that last night. Yeah. She studied him for a moment, noticing the lines around his eyes. Not old, but marked by experience. You lost someone, she said gently, remembering the photograph in the house. He did not look surprised by the question. My wife, he replied, 5 years ago. I'm sorry. After that, I spent a long time pretending I was fine, pretending I didn't need anyone, pretending I could handle everything alone. And could you? She asked. No, he said honestly, but I tried. They stood in quiet understanding. Ayana realized something important in that moment. Pain did not look the same for everyone. It did not matter whether it came from loss, from pressure, or from leaving home. It still shaped people in quiet ways. I don't want to lose my family, she said softly, but I don't want to lose myself either. You don't have to choose one over the other, Daniel replied calmly. Sometimes people just need time to see that. She wanted to believe him. Over the next few days, Ayana stayed at the ranch, not as a guest waiting helplessly, but as someone trying to build something new. She helped clean the barn, fed the horses, and even learned how to repair small sections of fence. Daniel never treated her like she owed him anything. Instead, he gave her small responsibilities, as if reminding her that she was capable. The sky would turn bright orange, then soft pink, then deep blue. Crickets filled the silence with gentle sound. One evening, she brought her small cloth bag outside and opened it. Inside were 3 books, a notebook filled with handwritten ideas, and a folded letter from her mother. Daniel noticed but did not ask immediately. After a while, she spoke. My mother wrote this after our last argument, she said, holding up the letter. She didn't agree with me leaving, but she also didn't tell me to stop. Sounds like she's torn, he said. She is, Ayana replied. She understands me more than others do. But she's afraid. Of what? Then I won't come back, she whispered. The thought hit her harder than she expected. Would she go back? Not to stay the same, but to return stronger, educated, able to help her people in new ways. She opened her notebook and showed him pages filled with ideas, plans for studying environmental policy, notes about protecting tribal land legally, sketches of community projects. You've thought this through? Daniel said, impressed. Yes, she answered. For years. He looked at her seriously. Then don't let anyone convince you it's just a passing idea. She felt warmth rise in her chest, not from praise, but from being understood. The following week, she visited the small college in town to ask about enrollment. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked through the campus doors. Everything felt unfamiliar. Students chatting confidently, bulletin boards filled with announcements, classrooms buzzing with activity. But she did not turn back. She asked questions. She gathered information about programs and financial aid. She learned about application deadlines. When she returned to the ranch that afternoon, her eyes looked different, hopeful. That's good, he replied calmly, though she could see pride in his expression. I'm scared, she admitted. Of failing? He asked. Of succeeding. He raised an eyebrow slightly. If I succeed, she explained, everything changes. He considered her words carefully. Sometimes change is exactly what's needed, he said. That night, as she lay in the spare room staring at the ceiling, she thought about her village, about her mother cooking by the fire, about her father walking the land at sunrise, about the elders who believed tradition should never bend. She did not feel anger toward them. She felt understanding. But she also felt clarity. For the first time in her life, she was not waiting for someone else to approve her dreams. She was stepping toward them. And even though the road ahead was uncertain, she was no longer walking it alone. The tears she had carried into town were slowly being replaced by something stronger. Not confidence yet, but courage. The days at the ranch slowly formed a rhythm. Ayana woke up early, helped with chores, studied college forms in the afternoon, and spent quiet evenings on the porch watching the sky change colors, For the first time in a long while, her thoughts were not racing all the time. She still missed her family, but the fear that had followed her into town was beginning to soften. But peace does not always last forever. One late afternoon, as the air grew heavy with the promise of rain, Daniel was repairing a section of fence near the front of the property. Ayanna was inside at the kitchen table, carefully filling out part of her college application. Her handwriting was neat but slow, as if each word carried weight. She paused when she heard the sound of a vehicle approaching. It wasn't unusual for trucks to pass on the main road, but this one slowed down. Gravel crunched under its tires as it turned into the ranch driveway. Ayanna's stomach tightened. Daniel looked up from the fence, narrowing his eyes slightly as the truck rolled closer. It was not a local vehicle. The paint was dusty from long travel. 2 men sat inside. Even before the engine turned off, Ayanna knew. Her hands grew cold. She stepped outside slowly, her heart beating hard against her ribs. The driver's door opened first. Her uncle stepped out. He looked the same as always. Strong posture, serious eyes, traditional necklace resting against his chest. On the other side, an older man climbed out carefully. He was one of the respected elders from her community. For a moment, no one spoke. The wind moved gently across the open field, carrying the quiet tension with it. Daniel removed his gloves and stood a short distance away, not interfering but not leaving either. "Uncle," she said softly. He studied her carefully. His expression was not angry, but it was firm. "You left without proper goodbye," he said. "I wrote a note," she replied quietly. "A note is not the same as facing your family," he answered. The elder stepped forward slowly, leaning slightly on a wooden walking stick. His eyes were calm but searching. "We were worried," the elder said. "Your mother has not slept well." Guilt washed over Ayanna, sharp and heavy. "I didn't want to cause pain," she said. "I just needed space." Her uncle glanced toward Daniel briefly, then back at her. "You are staying here?" he asked. "For now," she answered honestly. Silence fell again. Daniel stepped slightly closer, but remained quiet. He understood this was not his conversation to control. Her uncle crossed his arms. "People are talking," he said. "They say you have abandoned your responsibilities." "I haven't," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "I am trying to build something that can help us." "You believe leaving is helping?" he asked. Ayanna felt the old fear rise in her chest, the familiar pressure, the expectation to lower her eyes and apologize. But something inside her had changed. She lifted her chin slightly. "Yes," she said. The word surprised even her. Her uncle frowned. "Explain." She took a slow breath, trying to steady her thoughts. "I want to study environmental law," she began. "I want to understand how land agreements work, how decisions are made about water, forests, and property. If we don't learn these systems, others will continue making choices for us." The elder watched her carefully, his expression thoughtful. "You speak of learning from outsiders," he said. "I speak of learning tools," she replied gently. "Tools that can protect our home. Our traditions have protected us for generations." "Yes," she agreed quickly, "and they should continue. But the world around us is changing. We cannot close our eyes to that." The wind picked up slightly, lifting strands of her hair. Her uncle's voice softened just a little. "Your mother fears you will forget who you are." Ayanna felt her throat tighten. "I could never forget," she whispered. "Everything I am comes from our people. I carry it with me." The elder stepped closer, studying her face. "You seem different," he observed. "I am growing," she replied honestly, "not replacing who I was, expanding it." Daniel remained silent, but he could see the strength building in her posture. She was no longer the girl who had arrived in tears, unsure of her next step. She was still emotional, still vulnerable, but steadier. Her uncle sighed deeply. "We came to bring you home," he said. "Your place is with your family." The words hit her hard. Home. Family. Familiar voices. For a split second, she imagined climbing back into their truck, returning to the safety of known paths, ending the tension. But then she imagined the quiet feeling she had before leaving. Small, unseen, shrinking her dreams to fit inside someone else's idea of her future. Her heart beat loudly in her ears. "I love my family," she said slowly, "but I cannot come back right now." "You are choosing this place over us?" "No," she said firmly. "I am choosing my path. So one day I can stand beside you stronger." The elder looked at Daniel briefly. "And you?" he asked calmly. "What is your role in this?" Daniel met his gaze respectfully. "She makes her own choices," he said. I offered a place to stay. Nothing more. There was no challenge in his tone. Only honesty. The elder nodded slowly. He turned back to Ayanna. Do you understand the weight of your decision? Yes, she answered. Do you understand that independence also brings responsibility? I do. Her voice was steady now. Her uncle looked at her for a long moment. If you fail, he said quietly, there will be those who say they were right about you. And if you succeed, the elder added gently, you must remember why you began. I will, she promised. The air felt heavy, but something had shifted. The anger she had feared did not fully appear. Instead, there was disappointment mixed with reluctant respect. Her uncle walked back toward the truck slowly. Before opening the door, he paused. Your mother asked me to tell you, he said without turning around, that the door at home is not locked. Tears filled Ayanna's eyes, but this time they were not from fear. Thank you, she whispered. The elder gave her one last long look. Walk your path with honor, he said. Not pride. I will, she replied. They climbed back into the truck. The engine started, and gravel shifted beneath the tires as they drove away down the long road. Ayanna stood still, long after the vehicle disappeared from sight. The wind brushed against her face. Her legs felt weak. Daniel stepped closer but did not touch her. You okay? He asked gently. She let out a shaky breath. I don't know, she admitted. The tears finally came again, but they felt different. They were not filled with confusion this time. They carried release. You stood your ground, Daniel said quietly. I was terrified, she replied. Strength isn't about not being scared, he said. It's about speaking anyway. She looked out at the empty road. For years, she said softly, I thought respecting my elders meant silence. And now I think it means honesty. Daniel nodded slowly. They walked back toward the house together. The sky above them darkened with thick clouds, and soon rain began to fall lightly across the fields. Inside, Ayanna sat at the kitchen table again. The college application still lay where she had left it. She stared at it for a long moment. Her family had come. They had asked her to return. She had said no. The weight of that choice settled over her shoulders, but instead of crushing her, it steadied her. She picked up her pen. Her hand trembled slightly at first, but then it grew firm. Outside, the rain fell steadily, washing dust from the dry ground. Inside, Ayanna continued writing, not as a girl running away, not as someone rejecting her roots, but as someone stepping forward. And for the first time, the path ahead did not feel like a battle between two worlds. The rain that had fallen the day her uncle and the elder left seemed to wash something clean inside Ayanna. The air felt different the next morning. Fresh, steady, clear. The fields around the ranch shimmered under sunlight, and small drops of water clung to the fence posts, like tiny mirrors. She stood on the porch with a cup of warm tea in her hands, watching the horses move slowly across the damp grass. Her heart still carried emotion from the visit, but it was no longer tangled with fear. It felt grounded. Daniel stepped outside, adjusting his hat against the bright light. He glanced at her quietly. You sleep? He asked. A little, she replied honestly. He nodded. That's enough for now. She gave a small smile. Something had changed after that confrontation. She no longer felt like someone hiding at the edge of town. She felt visible, accountable, determined. Later that week, a letter arrived from the college. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it at the kitchen table. Daniel stood near the counter, pretending not to watch too closely. She unfolded the paper slowly. Her eyes scanned the first few lines. Then they widened. I got in, she whispered. Daniel leaned back against the counter, a quiet grin forming. I figured you would. She let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. It wasn't just acceptance into a school. It was confirmation that her path was real, that her dreams were not just ideas scribbled in a notebook. I have to find a place in town, she said, already thinking ahead. Classes start in 6 weeks. We'll figure it out, Daniel replied calmly. Over the next month, everything moved quickly. Ayanna found a small room for rent above the general store in Red Hollow. It wasn't large, just a bed, a desk by the window, and a narrow closet, but it felt like her own space. On her last evening staying at the ranch full-time, she stood in the barn brushing the same brown horse she had met her first week there. You helped me more than you know, she said softly, running her hand along the horse's neck. Daniel leaned against the barn door, watching. You helped yourself, he corrected gently. She turned toward him. You gave me room to breathe. He nodded slightly. Sometimes that's all a person needs. They walked back to the house together as the sky began its familiar shift into evening colors. Orange faded into pink, then into deep blue. The sunsets had become part of her healing, part of her growth. I was afraid when I came here, she admitted. I know. I thought I had to choose between my family and myself. And now? He asked. Now I think I can become someone who honors both. The next morning, she packed her small bag again, but this time it didn't feel like running away. It felt like stepping forward. Daniel drove her into town in his dusty blue truck. The same road that had once felt intimidating now looked familiar. As they reached the general store, a few townspeople glanced over, but the whispers that had once filled the air were softer now. Some even nodded politely. Over the past weeks they had seen her helping at the ranch, walking through town with quiet confidence. Reputation in small towns grows slowly, but it does grow. Daniel carried her small suitcase up the narrow staircase to her rented room. He set it down near the bed and looked around. Not bad, he said. She smiled. It's perfect. There was a pause between them. Thank you, she said sincerely. You already said that, he replied lightly. I'll probably say it again. He adjusted his hat. You'll do fine, Ayanna. She nodded, though a small nervous feeling fluttered in her chest. When he left, the room felt quiet. Not lonely, just still. She walked to the window and looked down at the street. Red Hollow no longer felt like a place she didn't belong. It felt like part of her journey. Classes began quickly. The first day she sat in the front row, notebook open, pen ready. The classroom buzzed with conversation. The students spoke confidently about majors and future careers. For a brief moment, doubt tried to creep in. Do I really belong here? But then she remembered standing in front of her uncle. She remembered saying no with a steady voice. She straightened her shoulders. Yes, I belong. Her courses were challenging. Environmental policy required long hours of reading. Legal studies introduced complex systems and unfamiliar terms, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt curious. Each new concept felt like adding another tool to her hands. She spent afternoons at the library, evenings reviewing notes. On weekends, she still visited the ranch to help Daniel. The rhythm of brushing horses and fixing fences balanced the intensity of her studies. One Saturday afternoon, while sitting on the porch at the ranch, her phone buzzed. It was her mother. Her heart jumped. She answered quickly. Hello? For a second, neither of them spoke. Then her mother's gentle voice filled the line. How are you? Ayanna's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. I'm studying, she said. It's hard, but good. Her mother listened quietly as she explained her classes, her small room, the town. I worry, her mother admitted softly, but I also see your courage. That meant more than any acceptance letter. I will come visit soon, her mother added. You will? Ayanna asked, surprised. Yes. I want to see this new life you are building. After the call ended, Ayanna sat still for a long time. Daniel stepped outside, noticing her expression. Good news? He asked. He's coming, Ayanna replied, her voice full of emotion. He nodded, understanding the importance. Weeks later, her mother arrived in Red Hollow. She stepped carefully out of a borrowed car, looking around at the small town. When mother and daughter saw each other, they embraced tightly. No arguments, no tension, just relief. Ayanna showed her the college campus, the library, her small rented room. She introduced her to Daniel at the ranch. Her mother observed quietly, taking in everything. That evening, as they stood together watching the sunset, her mother spoke softly. You look different, she said. I feel different, Ayanna replied. Stronger, her mother added. Ayanna nodded. I was afraid you would forget us, her mother confessed. I carry home with me, Ayanna answered gently. Her mother reached out and adjusted the traditional necklace resting against Ayanna's chest. Then walk your path proudly, she said. As months turned into a year, Ayanna's confidence deepened. She joined a campus group focused on land preservation. I would be so happy. She spoke in small meetings about the importance of respecting both tradition and law. Her voice no longer shook when she addressed a room. In Red Hollow, people began greeting her by name. At the ranch, Daniel watched her growth quietly. He never claimed credit, but he saw the difference. One evening, after a long semester ended, they sat on the porch again. The sky stretched wide and glowing above them. Do you regret it? He asked. Leaving? She replied. He nodded. She thought carefully. No, she said finally. It hurt, but it was necessary. He smiled slightly. You don't cry the same way anymore, he observed. She laughed softly. I still cry. Yeah, he said, but not from fear. She looked out over the fields. The girl who had once stood on a dusty road trying to hide her tears felt far away now. In her place stood someone steadier, not perfect, not without doubts, but rooted. You were right, she said quietly. About what? That I didn't have to pretend. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft glow behind. Ayana closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the wind brush against her face. She had not abandoned her past. She had not rejected her people. She had simply allowed herself to grow, and sometimes growth begins with tears on a quiet road. But it continues with courage, steady steps, and the simple truth that no one should have to pretend to be smaller than their dreams. Under the wide-open sky of Red Hollow, her story was no longer about running away.